when I realized that depression was setting in, I had to empty that backpack. I had to. And it wasn't something that I did overnight, but it was a period, a long period, and a mentorship with a buddy that I developed a brotherhood with that helped me empty that backpack. And
Mm.
so emptying that backpack made me vulnerable. And as a leader, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be able to empathize. You have to be able to listen. And for me, that foundation was being established. And once I knew that my backpack was empty and I could deal with stresses, because if you don't empty it, you see it time and time again.
San Diego 911 emergency. You need to come right away. There's a man with a gun and it's loaded. Receiving emergency signal from
4 George, 1141. We've got a white female down. We need paramedics closely.
all available units. Roll code that way.
Welcome to the De-Escalation Conversations Podcast. I'm here with Richard T. Sanchez, who's a law enforcement professional for 29 years. 29 years of law enforcement experience. He's an author. He's a speaker with extensive experience in criminal investigations and public safety operations. He's worked complex narcotics, organized crime, and interdiction cases. He brings real world, I can't talk today, insight from the front lines. He's also the author of a book called Chasing the High, where he shares lessons on resilience, told you I couldn't talk today, resilience, leadership, and the personal cost of high stakes service. Richard is passionate about mentoring others and discussing the mindset that's required to be able to succeed both on duty and off duty. And even though I'm tongue-tied, thankfully, Richard isn't, and he's here with us on the show. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, and let's hope that I can get my words out. My wife always says that I speak under my tongue, so I'll try my best to, be vocal and not mumble.
Well, you're automatically doing better than I am. So uh, let's talk about the book first, because that's really
Yes, sir.
exciting. And your book is unique in a lot of different ways. But let's start with the title, Chasing the High. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, chasing the high. So, uh, you know, I grew up in a heroin addicted family. I was surrounded by addicts, from grandparents to uncles to mom and dad to cousins. So it was a life that I was, very familiar with and very comfortable in. What ended up happening to me was, I took a very different change in the lifestyle I chose to live. However, the parallels of the law enforcement arena were just that of an addict. My adrenaline became my drug, and I chased that high and found myself in the depths, in the dungeons, just like an addict.
Mm. So, what does your book talk about? What when if I start reading it, what's the first thing that I'm going to be hit with?
Well, hopefully you'll enjoy the fact that my wife wrote the foreword. And my
Mm.
wife is really the one and spearheaded this whole operation per se with Eddie Weiss in 1910 Publishing. But what I'm hoping to have the reader digest immediately is that overcoming trauma and being a productive citizen is possible despite where you come from. So what we really took a dive into was just my history, my testimonial per se, and what I went through as a child, uh, the mental, the physical abuse, um, being subjected to heroin addicts and the lifestyle they live, and transforming that into a positive outcome for my life.
I have a question about this environment that you grew up in.
Yes, sir.
You, a lot of times when we talk about norms and beliefs and values and culture, typically the concept of why we do what we do or don't do what we don't do is based on a large part, not written law, not statutory law, but informal social pressures. Your peers, your family, and you're in this environment where this type of activity, just taking heroin addiction as one piece of it, you grew up where clearly that's normal. Clearly, the people that you look up to as you're growing up and are raised by, we tend to emulate those actions. Now, you talked about doing it with adrenaline, but why is it that you think, or how did you not go down that same path when so many people in your life that you would typically look up to did go down that path? Where's that? How did you form that disconnect? Because it really is a disconnect.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a believer in our Savior and Jesus Christ, and without Him, I would not be where I'm at today.
Yeah.
There is no doubt about that, and I'm not embarrassed or I'm not afraid to say it. My grandmother spent a lot of time, and that's who I was raised by, was my grandparents from my paternal side. My grandmother was a devout Catholic. She's passed. That's why I say was. But her prayers really did a lot of that for us, I believe. There was people that came into my life that were extremely influential, and the timing was impeccable. That when I started to sway and go down that road, the first time I met my dad, I was in and going into junior high, and he had just been released from prison for robbing a bank. My parents met at a rehabilitation center in San Antonio, Texas, and I was taken away from my mom in first grade and put in a shelter. And then my paternal grandparents came and got us, and then we were raised by them. But the first time I got to meet my dad, I was running the streets of San Antonio, bagging and ballooning heroin, holding it in my mouth as we sold it on the west side of San Antonio. Um, and it was, then he shortly thereafter he was arrested, and another individual came into my life that was a positive influence and kind of, redirected, and put me in a position to succeed.
Wow. I love what you said about timing being impeccable. God's timing is impeccable for sure. We don't always see it that way, but it certainly is. Let me ask you this. I want to shift gears just a little bit because you do a lot of training, a lot of teaching, a lot of sharing of your wisdom about leadership.
Yes, sir.
How did your childhood trauma shape your adult leadership?
So that's a great question. The backpack that I carried, which we all carried from childhood, right, wrong, or indifferent, or the parochial closet per se, that's busting out the seams with um, trauma that is not addressed. For me, started to cave, and it was a certain point in my life when I was coming back from being stationed in Colombia. I returned to San Antonio, and that time had hit. And the reason it had hit was because everything that I had always wanted to accomplish in my law enforcement career had been accomplished. Every battle that I fought to prove everybody wrong, I had won. And at the end of it, I was tired. I did not have the mental will to continue on. I was single, had been in failed relationships. I was drinking a lot. I loved the work. The bosses loved me. My coworkers, not so much because I was single. And, I didn't want to be at home by myself. And being at home by myself really usually meant starting off with a couple beers and then heading to the bar to see what new high I could chase per se with, things that bars bring in, um, failed relationships, um, women, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so when I realized that depression was setting in, I had to empty that backpack. I had to. And it wasn't something that I did overnight, but it was a period, a long period, and a mentorship with a buddy that I developed a brotherhood with that helped me empty that backpack. And then so emptying that backpack made me vulnerable. And as a leader, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be able to empathize. You have to be able to listen. And for me, that foundation was being established. And once I knew that my backpack was empty and I could deal with stresses, because if you don't empty it, you see it time and time again. Bosses come in, they're dealing with, sick kids, they're dealing with sick parents, they're dealing with a sick spouse, they're going through a divorce, whatever they have, they're already walking in to work at a level 8 or 9 out of 10. And then now you're dealing with a brand new rookie or you're dealing with a 20-year-old veteran, and your patience and temperament is not going to help the organization thrive and foster. So for me, what I had to do, and I knew that I had to do that to be a good leader, was I had to handle myself first. And I did that. I know it's a long-winded answer to a question, but I think it hits a lot of high points and highlights that I think were very important into the success of the teams that we built.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And you mentioned the word vulnerability. I want to
Yeah.
explore that a little bit with you, if you don't mind.
Hmm.
You said a leader has to be vulnerable. Now, what does that look like to you? When you
You
say,
got to have
I'm sorry, when
oh
when you
man.
say somebody needs to be vulnerable,
Hmm.
I mean, I have my ideas about it, but I want to hear yours.
So for me, it was very simple, right? Share my story, have patience, be able to relate, be able to open up and say, hey, this is my weaknesses. These are my weaknesses. These are my faults. These are my failures. I'm not embarrassed to talk about who I am. I'm not hiding and creating a facade as a person that doesn't exist. So all those had to be taken off the table. And what you saw with me is what you get. A very straightforward, very honest, very caring person that generally cared about the people that worked for me.
You use the word patience, and that just really resonated with me today, in that I think patience is a key part of true vulnerability, because it's when you're vulnerable, you're making it about the other person. You're not making it about you. You're saying, oh, I was such a victim, or I went through such horrible times. That's not being vulnerable.
Or I did this for you, or I did this for the organization. It was never about I, it was about they.
Yeah.
Hey, this is what highlighting their successes. I didn't need the accolades. I wanted the people that worked for me to have the accolades. I didn't promote because I wanted the extra money. I didn't promote because I wanted the glory of being the boss. I promoted because I had bad leaders and bad supervisors, and it made me not want to do the job. And I knew the job could be done. I knew the job could be fun. So I wanted the folks that worked for me to know, hey, this guy has my back. And why did they know that? Because I was vulnerable. They trusted me. With vulnerability comes trust. They knew that if they were going to make mistakes, I wasn't going to ridicule them. I wasn't going to scold them. Hey, that's part of the job. Nobody's perfect. And I also let them know that there's more than one way to get from A to B. In my time in 29 years, I had a lot of bosses says, no, this is the only way you can get to B, even though it was inefficient, it was more costly. It was, time was of the essence, but they wanted it done that way because they weren't empowering their people, which is what I also like to do. Preparing the next generation, leaving a true legacy, and that's how you do it.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I promoted for very similar reasons. I wanted to expand my sphere of influence on who I could protect and who I could help on the department.
Yes, sir.
And it's that same approach that you're talking about. So you're highly successful, highly successful.
Thank you.
As I've read about you and done my research, I think that a young officer could look to you. I know certainly if I was a young officer again, I would be looking, okay, what did Richard T. Sanchez do? And pick out the good things and hopefully learn from the not so good things. But let's talk about one of those not so good things.
Hmm.
Success has a cost.
Oh,
Nothing's
absolutely.
nothing's free. There are no free lunches in this world. So, what did success cost you on a personal level?
It cost me a lot of sleepless nights,
Mm,
which are fundamentally important, as we all know, and de-escalation and being able to mitigate conflict. Your brain needs to rest, your body needs to recover. And when you're not getting ample sleep, your diet is off, you're partaking in long nights, your phone never stops ringing, it's one crisis after the other. You know, I had to take a step back and really evaluate and prioritize. And the way I did that is I had a great mentor, and I still have a great mentor by the name of Tony Hubbard. He's my brother. Um, and he's always one that's really taken things in perspective. And he told me a long time ago, and this forever stays with me. So, Richard, don't love the job because the job don't love you back. But you love the people you meet on the job because they love you back. And I realized at that time that the whole high I was chasing by trying to prove everybody wrong was costing me my mental awareness. And I really had to reshift and refocus and prioritize and say it's okay to be selfish. It's okay for me to take care of me and have a me time, whether it be working out, whether it be running, whether it be lifting weights, or I do a lot of jujitsu. Um, but I found a lot of pleasure in doing peer support and helping those individuals out. They didn't when I wasn't hired, nor did I accept any money. It was more so, like you mentioned earlier, the young officer. They'll come up to me even today and say, "Hey, Richard, I want to be just like you." And my response is, "No, you don't. I want you to be better than me. My job is to make you better than me." And that's how we make people's lives better.
yeah, that's so true. So true. Okay, so you talk about I keep banging this thing here. I got to move it. You talk about the cost, personal cost. You talk about not loving the job because the job doesn't love you, love the people. Those are some universal things with law enforcement. And it's funny because when I retired after 30 years on the job, the next day, 911 calls are still being answered, traffic crashes are still being investigated, people are still being arrested and going to jail, even though Kerry's not there. The wheel keeps on moving with or without you. And sometimes we feel like we're indispensable. We're always on call and all those things. And it's a form of chaos that's sometimes controlled, sometimes wildly uncontrolled. But how do you step away from the chaos? When you talked about it's okay to be selfish, how do you step away from chaos without losing your purpose?
So that's a great question. Our chaos becomes normalized.
Hmm.
And once we leave that chaos, we don't know how to respond. So when I retired a year ago and we moved back from Belgium, at the time I was serving as the assistant special agent in charge for DEA in that position and covered 23 countries, 8 offices. And we came back to the San Antonio, Texas area. And, my wife is 15 years younger than I am. And she looked at me and she says, "Babe, I'm sorry, but you got to do something. You got to do something because you staying at home is just not working." And how often do we hear that, right?
Right.
For me, I was very blessed in the sense of my purpose was the fact that I have two very young children. I got married late in life, having a soon to be 8 and a 6-year-old. So for me, I was able to go, you know what? I was really, really fortunate and blessed in the job that I had and the successes that we all celebrated. Well, now it's time for me and my identity to be that of a husband and father. And about 2 to 3 years ago, I started preparing myself mentally for that transition.
Mm.
It's like caring for a loved one is getting ready to pass. You know it's coming, but you're trying to prepare and so in my mind, I had started doing this already. So when the time came, I was able to make that transition a little easier and recognize that the chaos that I had been living was not normal. And my wife tells me all the time, you are very different. You live in a different, very different world than I do. And she's right. Uh, and I had to accept that. So I've always made it a habit. Here's the fundamental principle that I personally do is that I always made it a habit to ensure I had friends outside of the job, that I didn't have to
Mhm.
talk about the job.
Yeah.
And that has been, extremely beneficial to me. And they've benefited me as much as I've benefited them. The relationships have been fantastic. Um, so it's just carried on into to today, where I'm a member of our church. I partake in church activities. I'm blessed with our children being involved in sports, so we formulate relationships with the parents. And it's a healthy lifestyle to where I've realized the chaos that I once lived was just that chaos, and I've accepted that.
So you've really shifted your identity from law enforcement officer, undercover operations, special assistant agent in charge to dad, husband. That shift from the intensity of all the things that you've accomplished in your career in your life to what seems like, and I know it's a lot of work, especially you throw in sports and school and everything else, especially at those young ages. But you shifted your identity and you have this intense life and now things are hopefully a little bit more sedate. The intensity is different. It's in your focus on parenting and being responsible for the kids and all that versus being responsible, for other things out in the field. How did that shift occur for you, and what was that like as you made that shift?
A lot it has to do with my faith. I can't say that enough. I really practice again me time, and part of that me time is really reflection, uh, reading my Bible passages, and spending a lot of time in prayer. The other thing is my continued mentorship with those closest to me, um, and also still being a part of the law enforcement community in the sense of helping people out that are going through the transition and the changes and, finding peace and the alcoholism and their own addictions. I'm still committed to that. And people still call on me. I mean, my wife would say, man, you still get as many phone calls as you did when we were in McAllen, because in McAllen, the position I held there was charged with, I had 155 people, $1 million plus budgets, responsible and for, congressional delegations where they would come down and border patrol chiefs and sheriffs and chiefs of police and doing media appearances and school appearances. So, it was a lot of time away from home. And for me, growing up without parents, I did not want my children to say dad is always working. I did not want to look back and have regret of, man, you were never here. All of a sudden you're showing up trying to run the house. I didn't want to have that. And I just had to make a conscientious change statement in my brain to not want to be that person.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Richard, I know that just after listening to you, much less hearing about your story, people are going to want to stay in touch with you.
Yes, sir.
And your website, which is kind of a unique website, one spelled out ONE, oneteamg.com. I got to ask, what's the G? Is that a typo when you were getting a URL, or what's one team?
No, that's a great question. But because I've worked in the global environment for so long, we wanted to let it know it was one team global, that our outreach is not just to domestic law enforcement officers, because I have worked in the foreign arena in Colombia, Mexico, Central America, and then Europe and Africa. We all suffer through the same challenges, and it doesn't have to necessarily be law enforcement. I've been fortunate enough to be able to give some testimonials and leadership speeches in the South Texas area, and they weren't law enforcement professionals at all. They were, crisis intervention. They were nurses. They were doctors. They were from different cultural backgrounds and ages, and um, very diverse. And so what we go through in the backpack of emotions and trauma that we carry affects us all, and we all have a story. And what I was simply trying to do was let people know that if I can, at the level that I held, in the positions that I held, bear my sins, sorrows, and regrets, that maybe you can too, and that maybe you can find peace and forgiveness, because that was a fundamental thing I had to do to move forward. Was I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself, and knowing that I was not to blame for the seeing my dad stick a needle in his arm and shoot heroin. I was not to blame that my mom was a prostitute. That was not my fault. But it took a lot to be able to forgive them and forgive myself.
That makes total sense. Makes total sense. Before we end this episode, I want to read one thing about your book. Chasing the High is the story of a man who escaped the life he was born into, only to realize he'd been chasing the same chaos in a different uniform. I just absolutely love that description of your book, and amazing work that you've done. You don't. One of the things I like about the book, you don't glorify violence, you don't glorify badges, you don't romanticize trauma. You very openly talk about emotional damage, control issues, marriage strain, identity after service, and anyone who's been raised in any kind of dysfunction. And I think that's pretty much the majority of people, not just cops, can really gain from reading your book. And I know Eddie Weiss from 1910 Publishing is the publisher for it, and in fact, he was the one that let me know about you. And
Yes, sir.
I'm so glad that he introduced us to each other, and I'm so glad that you agreed to be on this episode on the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. I'm honored to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to spending more time and being able to talk to you more.
No, man, it's been a pleasure to be here, and we've barely scratched the surface of the contents of the book, or even touched on the life that I've lived and survived. Because at this point, I consider it a survival. Um, and so, thank you for your time, and thank you for being there for us all in the law enforcement arena, and what you do. It's greatly valued and appreciated.
Well, thank you. And folks, if you're looking for Chasing the High, look for 1910 Publishing. All of these links will be in our show notes. You can also go to your local library. If your local library does not have it, I know a lot of you will look it up on the app on your library. Call a local library and tell the librarian, hey, how come you guys don't have this book, Chasing the High? It's an amazing book, and you guys should have it in your library for the community to be able to read. And then what will happen is the librarian will go search that out, and when they get requests from the community about getting books, they'll get the book and tell them, hey, you're going to need several copies, and get the ebook one too, not just the physical book. So, Richard, thank you for being on the show. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your wisdom. Thank you for taking the time and effort to write the book, because there's no doubt it's going to help a lot of people. And also, thank you for honoring God throughout your work. That's, as you said, you're not apologetic about it, nor should you be. And I'm with you on that.
Thank you, sir.
God is good to us. So,
We're great, man. We're blessed.
yeah, we are. Any last thoughts before we wrap this episode up?
No, I just want to thank Eddie Weiss at 1910 Publishing, yourself and my wife, and God for making this all happen. Let's get out there and help some people.
There you go. I can't think of a better way to put it. Folks, until always, as my favorite Sergeant Jim Reschke used to say, do unto others before they even think about doing unto you. And above all else, stay safe. Bye for now. You found a lot of great value in this episode of the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. Please be sure to go out to our website, theidea.world, THEIDEA.world. On that website, just click on the link that resonates with you most. If you're a K-12 educator, if you're a firefighter, medical services, law enforcement, flight attendants, whatever industry you're in, we have specialized training for you. So check that training out, because literally it can save your life, it can save your relationship, it can save your career. So check out theidea.world. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. This is Kerry Mensior, and thanks for watching this episode of the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. I hope you got some great insights that you can use right away. But don't stop here. Click that video link above and keep the momentum going with another powerful episode. And hey, if you haven't already, please hit that like button and the subscribe bell so you never miss an episode. New strategies, new stories, and new ways to connect coming your way every week. See you in the next episode.